the government has just announced big increases across the board in the minimum support price to be given to farmers on a whole range of farm produce, food grains, kharif crops, rabi crops, and in a pre-election year, this has been described as a big bonanza from Prime Minister Modi to the farmers. Now, we all know that India has been facing one of the severest agrarian crisis over the last few years, and farmers have been agitating across the country and asking for higher MSPs, basically asking for better income growth. Now, this seems to be the government's answer, and the cabinet today cleared the higher MSPs, but the farm association, the farm leaders are not totally satisfied. They have a different interpretation to what the government claims to have done. Now, to discuss this in some detail, we have with us our agriculture correspondent Kabir Agarwal, who will briefly tell us what exactly has the cabinet cleared and what exactly has the government announced. Kabir, why don't you just for our viewers, just briefly give some detail of where all the MSPs, minimum support prices, have been increased.
So this essentially comes from what Arun Jaitley announced in February in his budget speech. He said that we will provide 1.5 times the cost of production for the Kharif season, which comes now. Yeah. So actually the Kharif season, the sowing started last month. So actually governments generally announce the MSP in June, but this has been delayed. So what the government has done now is has announced the MSP for the Kharif crops for this season, for the 2018 and 19 season, just 1 year prior to the election. And the increases have been quite substantial as compared to previous seasons. The increases have been substantial, and paddy, rice, which is the crop which is heavily procured in this in the Kharif, among the Kharif crops, has seen an increase of 200 rupees. Okay. So it is now common paddy is now 1,750 rupees per quintal, as opposed to 1,550, which it was earlier. Mm-hmm. And similarly, ragi has seen the maximum percentage increase, about 52%. The new MSP for ragi is 2,897 per quintal. For cotton, it has gone up by rupees 1,100 to 5,100. So the increases have been substantial in many crops. But surprisingly, for dal, for the dals, tur dal has only gone up 225 rupees, which is an increase of only 4%, and urad only increase of 3%. And we have seen, especially in Madhya Pradesh, that farmers have been agitating about not getting the MSP which had been previously announced. In fact, they have just today announced that they will be agitating starting from the 7th of July. So to get the MSP which was there previously. So they are their claim is that on the ground what is happening is that they are not getting the MSP which has been announced by the government, because the government's procurement mechanisms only work for essentially wheat and rice. They have established procurement mechanism only for wheat and rice, and according to the government.
So this is one fundamental problem. That today the government claims that it has announced higher MSPs for some 20 plus food products, but on the ground there is procurement mechanism, a sound procurement mechanism exists only for wheat and rice, right?
So what this would essentially mean that this is a massive increase. So this would on paper mean theoretically that inflationary pressures would increase, that the inflation will increase since food prices are going up. But market experts have been commenting on TV today saying that inflationary pressures are not going to be seen, that food prices are not going to increase because the procurement mechanisms to give these price to farmers are not in place.
Not in place.
So essentially
now, so let us tell our viewers, the real problem is, in the past also governments have announced higher procurement prices for several products across the board. Say there are 26 products, but on the ground, the procurement mechanism, which is at the center and the state level, the enforcement of these prices is the real problem. Unless the government, center or state governments, they actually go out and invite farmers to buy their products at these prices, obviously there won't be any impact on the market prices, right? So therefore, because largely these MSPs remain unenforced, that we find that market prices of all these products are invariably way below the MSPs announced by the government. Isn't that true?
That's true.
Like we've seen this with pulses. Last year, the market price of pulses were at least 20-25% below the MSPs announced.
Even for chana, for many such crops, except for rice and wheat, essentially, the market prices for all crops are at some point of time or the other in the season below the MSP.
So this is one could argue that this is political optics at the moment.
Correct.
Now the proof of the pudding will be seen in October when these crops are harvested, and only then will we know how much of these MSPs are actually being implemented on the ground, how many farmers are able to sell at this price, right?
So essentially, announcing these MSPs by itself is not enough. This is a welcome move. The MSP should have been increased. There is no doubt about that.
And it is linked to the elections general elections next year. The BJP hasn't thought of doing this in the last 4 years when the farmers have been agitating about it.
In the first 3 years, the BJP took credit for not increasing the MSP and thereby controlling inflation. Now it is wanting to take credit for increasing the MSP.
And still controlling inflation. Because much of it will not be implemented, right? So that's the level of cynicism that our public policy discourse is seeing these days. Now tell me, one key promise of Narendra Modi, which he made in 2014, was that he'll give farmers 50% over and above the cost of production. Now, in the last 3 years, the government had been saying that it is difficult to meet 50%. They even said this in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, they submitted an affidavit.
Yeah, the affidavit that it's difficult to give 50% over and above the cost of production. But suddenly, as if pulling a rabbit out of the hat, now they are saying that with these prices they have met the cost of production. Now, obviously, there is some. This is a smoke screen, because the cost that this government is using is not the cost formula that Swaminathan committee had recommended, right? So just try to explain to our viewers what are the costs that structure the Swaminathan committee had recommended, and how this government is creating its own interpretation of cost. Yeah.
So before 2014 and even during the UP assembly elections last year, Narendra Modi had clearly specified that the government will implement the recommendations of the Swaminathan Commission. Yeah. And one of the key recommendations which the farmer organizations and protests have been about, that has been the core demand, is to increase the MSP and set it at...
And this is the core demand of the farmer in the last 3 years.
Yeah. This will be heard at every farmer protest across the country. And so...
So what is the cost that the farmer talks about?
The Swaminathan Commission had said that 1.5 times the cost of production should be the MSP.
Okay.
And they had specified there are 3 costs which are calculated. One is A2, which just takes the cost of production of the crop itself. A2F,
which includes inputs like seed, fertilizer, water, etc. Right?
Yeah. And also and then A2 plus FL, which also takes into account the cost of land, cost of cultivation, and then there is C2, which is the comprehensive cost of production, which also takes in the imputed land rent value, which should accrue, which any corporate company would expect, that if they own land, they also get rent on land.
Absolutely, this is in any costing in the industry, the rent, the land rent is calculated as part of the cost. Yeah. So by the same logic, it should be for the farmers too. Correct. And I'm told that about 30-40% of the farmers actually they work on land taken on rent. Correct. So they actually pay that cost also, right? Yeah. So why isn't this cost this C2 cost not being included? So they are only including actual input cost plus family labor, correct, right, which is called A2 plus FL. So why is C2 not being included is something that this government doesn't have an answer to, right?
It's clear it's not been done even now. Like even if we take for
these MSPs that they have announced.
Yeah, these MSPs. If we take, for example, paddy, and we take the cost of production according to the Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices last year, it was 1484 was the cost of production C2. So by that standard, if it was 1.5 times the cost of production, the MSP should have been 2,226, and it is only 1,750. So it's a massive difference. It's a difference of 500 rupees, and
In fact, there's one farm leader who, Avik Saha, who's the convener of the All India Kisan Andolan. He says that if you include the C2 cost, then the MSP for paddy should actually be 2,200 rupees per quintal and not 1,750 that they've announced. Yeah. So there's a huge shortfall.
There's a huge difference.
Huge difference if you include C2 cost.
And even Narendra Modi,
So do you think politically this will go down well with the farmers? I'm wondering. I don't think, since the farmers have understood this, and all over the country the farmers are talking about including C2 as part of the cost. And if the government says that they're not including C2, and without including their claim, the government claims that it is giving 50% over the cost of inputs.
The farmers understand this difference. They understand this crucial.
So what is you've been talking to a lot of these farm leaders? What are they saying?
So they have been demanding that C2 be included. And this has been a topic of discussion since Arun Jaitley announced this increase, because he did not specify.
Have you spoken to some farm leaders after the cabinet announcement a few hours ago?
Yeah, I have spoken, and they have said that it's not enough. And it's not, for one, the increase by itself is not enough, because they say that C2 should have been taken as a cost. And the second is that just by announcing MSPs, that is not enough. They need to announce a procurement, what changes they are making to the infrastructure of the procurement mechanisms. So, and something of the sort of the Bhavantar scheme which Madhya Pradesh introduced, which hasn't worked too well, but which could, if it is tweaked, it can work well.
So to explain to our viewers, the Bhavantar scheme is, since neither the centre nor the state governments today have the infrastructure in place to actually procure from the farmers, what's the point in having an MSP if you can't physically procure? So what some state governments are doing is, they are not procuring directly from the farmers. They are letting farmers sell in the market, and the deficiency between the MSP and the market price, farmers are getting less than the MSP. They are actually meeting the price gap, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
that is how it works in theory, but it hasn't quite worked like that, because we've seen that wholesale dealers have actually reduced the price artificially so that they get the benefit of Bhavan, so that the government has to pay more, and the prices have been depressed for a lot of those crops as they have been included in Bhavantar, and the prices were higher before their inclusion in Bhavantar, is what's happened in Madhya Pradesh. But with certain tweaks, I think that scheme is something which can be a model for the country, and it can work well. But and Arun Jaitley had also announced that something of that sort will, the Niti Aayog has been mandated to come up with something of that sort, but it hasn't happened.
And what about the Telangana experiment? Recently, Telangana announced a kind of direct income support to farmers, irrespective of the MSPs and other schemes that are there. So this acts like a kind of meeting a certain income gap directly given to the farmers. Now, do you think that the other states are also looking at schemes like that?
Well, I think that scheme has also been criticized because it also distorts the cropping patterns a little bit, and so there are those. It remains to be seen how well that works. Plus that, and also will add a huge cost.
But another criticism of that scheme is that it doesn't cover land not owned by farmers.
Correct.
So, the rented land, which is the bulk of farming takes place on rented land. So finally, we have a situation where the government is calling this big increase in MSP a bonanza. The farmers are saying, let's wait for October when the Kharif crops actually are produced, and they want to see whether the government indeed has the infrastructure and mechanism to procure this crop and deliver this promise. So the proof of the pudding really is in its eating, which we will know come October. Thanks for watching.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.